American Top 40!
And now we're up to the recording act, who's tied a major chart record. His first 6 national single releases all reached the top 3, and only one other act has ever done that before. It was a group created in Hollywood for a TV show. Back in 1966, 2 Hollywood producers held an extensive audition to form what they hoped would become America's answer to the Beatles. And more than 425 people tried out for this group, including songwriter Paul Williams, a future member of Three Dog Night, Danny Hutton, rocker Stephen Stills, and even, believe it or not, a man who later became a notorious criminal, Charles Manson. Well, the 4 performers who eventually captured the coveted roles were Davy Jones, Peter Tork, Mickey Dolenz, and Michael Nesmith, and they became the Monkees. And the group's first 6 national single releases all made the top 3, giving them the all-time record. Hey, here are the Monkees.
Take the last train to Clarksville and I'll meet you at the station. You can be here by 4:30 'cause I've made your reservation. Don't be slow. No. Then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love. I'm a believer. I couldn't leave her if I tried. Girl, you know that it's true. It's a little bit me. It's a little bit you. Another Pleasant Valley Sunday. Charcoal burning everywhere. Rows of houses that are all the same, and no one seems to care. Cheer up, sleepy Jean. Oh, what can it mean to a daydream believer and a homecoming queen?
Those are the Monkees. We heard Last Train to Clarksville, I'm a Believer, A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, Pleasant Valley Sunday, Daydream Believer, and Valerie. The first 6 releases and all top 3 hits for the Monkees.
Around the world with a shadow.
Well, now let's find out whatever happened to the Monkees. They were the group that Hollywood manufactured to compete with the Beatles. In 1966, NBC ran a want ad in the trade papers for rock and roll singers who could act, and hundreds of talented young guys answered it. But only 4 were chosen: Davy Jones, Peter Tork, Michael Nesmith, and Mickey Dolenz. Then after several months of musical rehearsals, drama coaching, dance lessons, costume fittings, and photo sessions, it all came together that fall in a hit television series called The Monkees. Before we find out what happened to them, let's hear the first record they ever released, a #1 smash of 9 years ago.
Take the last train. Take the last train to Clarksville.
Remember that one? Last Train to Clarksville, an AT40 extra, a former #1. That was the first record released by the Monkees, coinciding with the debut of their TV series in the fall of '66. Now, you know their act was a smash for 2 big years. Then in 1968, NBC canceled the show, and the boys continued as a group for a while, but that didn't really work out, and they went their separate ways. Davy Jones, the Englishman, had been an actor before, and he went back to doing that quite easily. Mickey Dolenz formed a production company and made some commercials for national advertisers, not to mention the fact that he was one of the stars of the cartoon show Funky Phantom. Peter Tork continued as a performer living in San Francisco for several years, moved down to Venice, California, and is now teaching music. Mike Nesmith went on writing songs and performing and had a couple of hits with his first national band. Currently, he's running his own record company in Northern California. Well, last spring, the ghost of the Monkees took on some flesh and bones. As a lot of you already know, Davy Jones and Mickey Dolenz formed a new 4-man group. It included Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart, the songwriting team who composed a lot of the Monkees' hits back in the 60s, including Last Train to Clarksville. They billed themselves as Dolans, Jones, Boyce, and Hart, and we wish them the very best of luck. So that's what's happened to the Monkees.
American Top 40.
Billboard ranks them, AT40 counts them down. Well, now we're up to our AT40 Extra, a #1 smash by the act that holds the record for most consecutive weeks at #1 on the album chart. It's a four-man band who were created as an American copy of the Beatles. Each of the members had a distinct and pleasing personality. There was the Englishman girls thought was so cute, Davy Jones, former child actor Mickey Dolenz, shy blonde Peter Tork, and tall Michael Nesmith, the most experienced musician of the group. In copying the Beatles, their manager even formed their name the same way. They took the name of an interesting animal and changed the spelling slightly. They called them the Monkees, spelled Monkees. And they even copied the Beatles when it came to getting hit records. The Monkees ran off 11 top 40 hits, including 6 top 10s with 3 #1s in a short span of 18 months. And they set a record on the album chart by occupying the #1 position for more weeks in a row than anybody else. And here's how they did it. Their first album, called The Monkees, hit #1 at the end of 1966, and it held the top spot for 13 straight weeks, until their second album, called More of the Monkees, knocked the first album out of the #1 position and stayed in the top spot for 18 weeks more, which gave the Monkees continuous possession of the #1 spot in the album chart for 31 weeks, an all-time record. And here's a song that started the Monkees climbing. Their first hit, a #1 smash from 1966, an AT40 Extra, Last Train to Clarksville.
Take the last train to Clarksville.
That's an AT40 Extra, Last Train to Clarksville by the Monkees, a #1 smash from 1966.
American Top 40.
I'm Charlie Van Dyke for Kasem on American Top 40. Now, let's find out what happened to one of the most popular bands of the 1960s, who also had their own TV series. Whatever happened to the Monkees? Here's their story. In late 1965, at the height of Beatlemania, producers Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider wanted to create an American version of the Beatles for TV. They auditioned over 400 young men. The 4 they picked were Englishman Davy Jones and Americans Mickey Dolenz, Peter Tork, and Mike Nesmith. They became the Monkees. Record producer Don Kirshner and top songwriters worked with them on their debut album. It was a smash, followed by the Monkees TV show and more success. It was Monkey Mania. The group had 6 top 10s, 3 of them #1s. But by the end of 1969, less than 4 years after they'd formed, it was over. The Monkees broke up. Davy Jones, who'd been a child actor in England, returned to the stage. On Broadway, he was the Artful Dodger in Oliver. And these days, at the age of 38, he's back in England, training as a jockey to ride in the British Grand Nationals. He's also writing his autobiography to be titled, They Made a Monkey Out of Me. Now, Mickey Dolenz, who's also 38, is also living in England. He's directed a lot of TV and stage productions there. Peter Tork is 39 and lives in Venice, California, with his wife and kids. He also works with his own band based in New York. And then there's Mike Nesmith, the monkey who wore the knitted hat. Mike became a pioneer in video production. His video, Elephant Parts, is already a classic. He's also a movie producer. His latest is Repo Man. And recently, he was inducted into the American Video Awards Hall of Fame for his video achievements. And that's what's happening with the Monkees of the 1960s, now doing their own different things in the 1980s. For Kasem, I'm Charlie Van Dyke, and the countdown continues.
Casey's Coast to Coast.
Now, our update on the rebirth of one of the most popular bands of the 60s, an American group meant to be a copy of the Beatles, the group called the Monkees. When the Monkees TV series premiered in 1966, it was an instant hit, and their records were a smash. 6 top 10s, 3 #1s. But by 1969, it was over. The Monkees broke up, but their TV show is still in syndication 20 years later. And listeners are always writing in asking for updates on the 4 Monkees: Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Mike Nesmith, and Peter Tork. Well, when we last checked 2 years ago, Davy was back home in England acting on stage. Mickey was also in England directing and producing for British TV. Back in California, Peter Tork was teaching music at the University of California in San Diego, and Mike Nesmith was making award-winning videos. So what's happening now? Well, 3 of the Monkees have reformed. Mickey, Davy, and Peter are touring the U.S. this summer as the Monkees. The 4th Monkee, Mike Nesmith, won't be joining them. He says the group's now just a part of his past. And he certainly doesn't need the money. He's a multi-millionaire thanks to something non-musical. His mother, the late Betty Graham, was a secretary who invented the popular typewriter correction fluid called liquid paper. And she made a fortune. Mike Nesmith inherited that fortune. And that's our update on the Monkees as the countdown continues.
The hits from coast to coast.